Welcome, valued viewers and those from beyond Trinidad and Tobago. This is Talking Point on WESN, the HD station in the nation, so celebrate with determination. Shaw Michael Small, Hair Sans Keaton Shah. Once again, hashtag free Keaton Shah. But we will be flying solo, but not for long. The good lady at Talking Point should be joining us in about 15 to 20 minutes there to speak about some of the more ongoing deeper issues, well, one ongoing deeper issue in the country. But in the meantime, there's some unfortunate news, some of which is dependent on your perception. Some of it, we will all agree, a tragedy. So we will start off today, of course, as always, with the Daily Review. And it has been reported that 2 police officers were more or less the victim and perpetrator of a murder-suicide. It is an unfortunate incident where I don't want to make a big deal out of it because it shouldn't be a big deal. But we recently were speaking about situations like these with our colleague Janelle John Bates. In this situation, it just so happened that the female member of the couple was actually the perpetrator, Josette Marshall. She actually called a relative after shooting and killing Corporal Dyke Skeets, basically telling of her intentions to kill herself. There were reports before the first gunshots were heard that there might have been a struggle or an argument. Of course, I'm not entirely sure. I do wonder if this was just potentially a dispute that escalated, and then in the heat of the moment, tragedy happened, and the young lady was unable to get over that and took her own life. So I'm not entirely sure if this is quite like what we would normally see when we hear about murder, suicides. And usually it seems as though the perpetrator has the full intention of killing their significant other and then killing themselves. But in this case, she took pause to explain herself. I think she was actually surprised and stunned at everything that happened. Of course, I could be wrong. The police might come to a different conclusion. But either way, it is a tragedy. It just goes to show, on one hand, just because you're police officers does not mean that you are not human like anybody else. And more importantly, also, these sorts of stresses, because I think, unless we hear reports that one or the other was very abusive, these sorts of stresses in relationship, they could take a hold of men and women. Not at every extreme situation is because one of the partners is evil, but if the situation is allowed to break down to this extent, because one party or both don't know exactly what is the best way forward, you can never tell how far bad things could go. You know, you just need the right series of unfortunate events with miscommunication, too much time and stress from the job, not enough time spent for each other, and we get this situation. Of course, I am going to continue to monitor it. I'm going to be open for new information on cases like these. Unless it's something very sensational, they tend to not come out of respect for the victims' families and respect for the deceased's privacy. So it would have to be something extreme to get me to change my view on it. But the main thing, of course, is it is a tragedy. It goes against the trends of what we see, how these cases go locally. And our hearts and prayers goes out to the families. Hopefully, we won't see, as we saw a couple years ago, a series of these as the strain of the lockdowns and other factors were getting to people. Hopefully, we don't see more of that. And this is an isolated incident. So, moving on. Back to the opening of Parliament and the President's call for bipartisan collaboration. Now, an interesting thing has come out where political analysts are very skeptical about this collaboration within the legislature. And it could be that there is a certain perception. Our political class is not really going to get the benefit of the doubt from the politician, from political analysts, from members of the media with regards to, are they really willing to collaborate? Because they say they are. And they will point out, you see, we gave them a chance, you see, they gave them a chance. In my opinion, I am not sure that either side really went 100% with regards to doing everything they can to encourage collaboration with the other side. Their main focus seems to be on the legislative part. Because, again, to pass bills with anything more than a simple majority in the House, you're going to need opposition support. And with regards to crime, the President called out crime specifically, and one of the analysts pointed out something that should be obvious to everybody, and maybe it missed some of us. I didn't necessarily think about it in this way. But the opposition has, in this one instance, a proposition. So to some degree, there is an agenda, not an agenda in the nefarious sense, a political agenda. And the political agenda for the opposition is to say, we want stand your ground legislation, we want people to be able to defend themselves. In their opinion, that's the most effective way for individuals to defend their home. This came at a time when burglaries and home invasions were, they were getting the most press. They were at the zenith of the perception. The government is against that. There are practical reasons why it might not be a good idea, as well as practical reasons why it might not be practical. One of the reasons is home invasions weren't necessarily a crime that was actually skyrocketing and increasing and getting out of hand. It was just being, to some extent, noticed more. There were more cases, but we're talking about a handful more cases than the norm. It was closer to the mean. It was closer to the annual average than we think, as much as it was getting a lot of attention. So why, take extraordinary measures, especially since major crimes outside of murders are supposed to be decreasing? And I do believe there was one instance where a lady was able to kill one of the potential home invaders, and that's on one hand an argument. You see, it works. Let people protect themselves, they can. On the other hand, it might already had a very positive effect with regards to the crime rates, as the perception is, listen, I'm a criminal, I don't want to go inside somebody's house, I don't know what they have, and I might just end up dead for it. Because they're not cops, they don't need to warn me or worry about my rights in certain ways so much. Once they are reasonably threatened by my presence, potentially all bets are off. And it doesn't matter to me if the courts finds the use of force excessive if I'm dead. So the opposition, though, they have that agenda. And that agenda, there's pros and cons to it. There's practical reasons why it might not work. It just physically might not be possible to get enough firearms for a stand your ground policy to even be practical. But one of the other things that the analyst pointed out, and this one got me interested, and it kind of shows how complex the issue is, and it's not enough to just tell the UNC and the PNM, shake hands and make up and work together. We can't, this is not a schoolyard thing. One of the analysts pointed out that when the government had the bail bill, 6 of the independent senators of the time did not support it. So as much as we could get the opposition support, there's a third party in this discussion, and the whole point was, well, sometimes the laws or the proposals are just bad. Was the bail legislation bad? The concept overall might have been okay, but there's a lot of fine details that, You know, we won't necessarily read through with regards to everything that's being presented. And this is where it's good for shows like this to have legal experts come on and speak about it when these things happen. And it's not limited to the government because the opposition has an agenda. It'd be interesting to see what the independent senators would have to say, but they would probably only get a chance if the opposition had a chance to bring it to Parliament as legislation, and that would probably mean that they would have to be the majority government. I don't think, even if they could do it, I don't think they would do it as a minority party. So, at the end of the day, we're saying, yes, collaborate, but the proposals from either side has to be good. If it's not good, then I could fully understand when the opposition says, and when the government says, that's not possible. Of course, the problem is we're so cynics already. It's hard to tell when it is legitimate criticisms on a technical level and when it is just politicizing the issue. All right. Next story. I have a whole host of happy stories this morning, sarcastically, if you could tell. One that's not entirely negative, but maybe procedural. So, of course, as we all know, there's an election petition for Arima Northeast because in the span of the recounts, I believe the one seat that the opposition, the UNC, was able to capture was actually overturned. I think it might have been the PNM that asked for that recount. Of course, the election petition was fined with the courts. However, there's a technicality that the EBC is pointing out because the petition did not name, it had to be brought against the winner of the seat. You have to file the petition against their win. It has to be served on Garcia, right, who is the seat's winner. And technically speaking, because that was not who the petition was filed against, the EBC is claiming that it has to, well, it has to end the petition. So this is somewhat unsatisfactory at the end of the day, I guess you could say. It's unsatisfactory because on one hand, yes, I understand, you cannot do something that the law does not account for, right? Because then it's a free-for-all. But at the same time, that's not really a result. Because if somebody wants to challenge legally the result to get the final answer, we haven't had that. We've gotten the, well, your challenge might fail, and technically it's incomplete. Now, I mean, obviously, if I was a PNM supporter, I wouldn't care about that. But as somebody here on this seat who strives, I wouldn't say I always succeed, but strives for objectivity, I would prefer, if anything is in doubt in any way, no matter how small, things be taken to the end. And we could get a final result, even if it might be a waste of time. We're not talking about repeating arguments for plans to pave a new road. We're talking about an election here. Some things are important enough to spend that effort, that extra effort, that redundant effort that might seem like a waste of time, but we need to be sure. That said, the implication here is that whoever filed this petition, assuming that, you know, I have not misinterpreted the reports and the law and everything that the EB says is correct and there isn't any other technicalities hiding, waiting in the wings, it implies that whoever filed this petition, this is that important. What are you doing? Making rookie mistakes. making technical mistakes at this level. So on one hand, I would like to see things played out to the end, but on the other hand, and this, one might argue, this is a UNC problem, because are you just leaving it to a local election candidate to kind of run the show? Because this is on the symbolic importance of the Arima seat is to the party on a national level. So didn't the party nationally put a team together, go through everything with a fine tooth comb, and then say, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it? Because in most legal cases, I do believe that's generally what you do. You get experts who know what they're doing. You don't just kind of shoot from the hip. And you ensure, hopefully, that this is your best chance. So this is a very, 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 very minor knock. But if you're going to flub something like this, something so simple like this, are you ready for more responsibility on the national stage? I don't think so. Finally, have to be quick because I'm over time, but there is a controversy over a local pageant. I believe it's Miss Grand International. The TNT representative for this pageant was decided over the weekend, and the person picked, chosen to be Miss TNT for Grand International is someone who has only lived in the country for 6 years, who is not a primary English speaker, and arguably who is not primarily from our culture, and questionable if they could represent us. Now, my stance was, hey, if they allowed her to come in, we can't fault the judges for picking her if they thought she was the best candidate. That's a lot of assumptions right there. That's a lot of assumptions right there. However, we have to question the pageant. Why was she allowed as someone who's living here 5 to 6 years, if so much? Is that what it takes? That's all it takes to be a Trimegonian woman, to live here 5 to 6 years? Does she even have residential status or what have you? Well, I assume so. But like, does she have a Trini passport? Like, what is her legal status as a citizen? Because she's representing the country. That's the issue. The issue is not her winning, if it was just an isolated local thing. But she's going on to represent the country, and she wasn't born here. And I know sports, you don't have to be born in the country. You just need to have like something to connect you. That's fine. That's sports. I don't know if in pageants, if it quite works the same way. You know, maybe you live your adult life abroad, but you were born here, you grew up here, your family here. There's a lot of question marks over how correct this is, and I can't fault people for complaining about it. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, we welcome the good lady into Talking Point here on WSN, your content capital.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizen celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past it's no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andrew.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing. We are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. And as, of course, the discussion on crime continues and the discussion from the President's speech about the legislation of crime continues, and of course it has brought up the Bail Act once again, we have also to consider what now seems to be like the age-old question, the age-old debate. It's only about 20 years old, but it's age-old, folks. At this point, with the way how our crime going, it's like lifetimes old. The CCJ or the Privy Council, which one would we be better off with? Because, believe it or not, there are pros and cons for both. They each offer different things. One of the things that the CCJ offers is, it's right there. It's right there. And it offers a perspective that is closer to our own. There's a lot of good in that, maybe sometimes some bad. But to speak about a lot of the technical issues, because perception is one thing, but the legal reality is a concrete flaw that we can't get past. We have the good lady herself, former Minister of Finance, and still attorney at law and legal academic, Karen Shishera.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here with you, Sean, and with the audience. Yes, so in looking at what we would be discussing today, obviously, the Bail Act brought all the issue of the Privy Council back to the forefront, because at the end of the day, I just want to say that the Privy Council upheld the decision of the Court of Appeal regarding the whether the Bail Act extended to murder and treason, that you could not grant bail for certain Schedule 1 offences, one of which would be murder. And the Court of Appeal and the CCJ and the Privy Council did agree on that. Just want to make one little aside, just for clarity, because of a guest I had on. The CCJ has original jurisdiction. What does that mean? It means that any matters that come under the Treaty of Chagaramas, for example, movement of peoples, trade agreements, trade disputes, and so on, those go, all jurisdictions go to the signatories to the Caribbean Court of Justice. The appellate jurisdiction is the other matter. I think St. Lucia is the most recent member. Trinidad is not, and neither is Jamaica, and so on and so on. So let's get straight to the issues. The reason why I'm going to start with the death penalty case is because of the distinction between the decision of the CCJ on that same issue as opposed to the Privy Council. And there are a number of cases, which I'm not going to go through them in any vast detail, but the point is the case that really created the sort of upheaval, if you want to use the word, in the Privy Council was one of the panels of the law lords who sit as Privy Councillors. They had to determine whether the savings provision, which is in Section 5 of our 1976 Constitution and in Section 3 of our 1962 Constitution, but essentially what it does, it says that any existing laws prior to us becoming independent remain valid laws. They are valid laws, and they're laws that apply to the country. And the idea was to allow for a smooth transition from colonial status to independent status. There are qualifications to that. It says that it allows for certain issues of modification and qualification. So the bottom line is this. When the Rudall matter was heard as a murder case, he argued that the Offences Against the Persons Act 1925, which is a law that existed before we became independent, says, I think Section 3 or 5, I can't remember the exact section, but it says the penalty for murder shall be death, or the death penalty. So the use of which shall be the death penalty. And so the question arose as to whether that provision was what they call, to make it very simple, either a fixed provision or maximum provision, meaning that if it's a fixed penalty, there's no judicial discretion. If it is a maximum penalty, it allows judicial discretion, including allowing a life sentence and the death penalty. And soon after, Rudall said yes, it did allow judges to exercise the power of the maximum penalty rather than a fixed penalty, in other words, giving them judicial discretion. Well, right on the heels of Rudall came Matthews. And the problem with that, people may know, is that the courts decided after Matthews, and then a whole slew of cases that came afterwards and followed Matthews' decision that it's a fixed penalty, not a maximum penalty. So that's where we are in the law. But between the Rudall and Matthew hearing, there were about, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think it's about 200 and something to 300 persons were on death row because of that provision that we inherited under the pre-constitution situation. And what the court decided is it was unfair to those persons who had, after the rural hearing, for them to be, the death penalty to be applied to them. So all of their sentences were commuted to life. Now what that meant is once it was commuted to life, many of them, and they have, because they can now do this, go to the court and argue mitigating circumstances to reduce even their life sentence to a lower sentence. So that has been the consequence of the rural case. And why I'm bringing it up, because I did mention to you that some of the jurisdictions went the way of the CCJ as a final appellate court. And one of them was Barbados. And they had a case called Neuve, a death penalty case. They referred to their provision, their savings provision. And this is what they had to say. I think it's section 11. But what they said, and very harsh, I thought, a bit, in terms of their language. They said that the subject to the provisions of this section, the existing laws shall be construed with such modifications, adaptations, and qualifications and exceptions as may be necessary to bring them in conformity with Barbados Independence Act 1966. They ruled in the case which provided that it says that the saving clause must be given a restrictive interpretation which would give individuals full measure of freedom of rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. I think a lot of what impacted on their decision, they said that Barbados is ratified the Inter-American Human Rights Act or provisions, and that they felt that whatever their act, constitution said, it was subject to those human rights. So the bottom line is that you have a Neuve case out of the CCJ coming to a different decision to the Privy Council on murder cases. And so, I mean, that gives you a very stark example of the distinction between the CCJ and the Privy Council in interpreting the savings provision, which saves laws that were passed prior to independence, because that is the basis of the Neuve case also. It was legislation that the death penalty shall be imposed for murder cases. Same kind of provision, and the similar savings provision as we had, but they decided that it was subject to human rights provisions to which Barbados was a signatory. So that takes care of the death penalty cases, and you see the broadest difference between the findings of both courts. The other one, which is more recent, was the local government case. And why that local government case is important, I think, and I'll end, of course, with the last thing, which is the Bail Act. The reason why the local government case was important is because it concerned amendments to the Local Government Reform Act of 2022. And as we all know, that the term of office under the Municipal Corporation Act is 3 years. And this Local Government Act 2022, by proclamation, extending the life of the councils and aldermen to 4 years, rather than the 3 years that had been applicable. And the question that was brought up by Ravik Balgomin against the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago was whether the period of office extension for 1 year, because you extended it from 3 years to 4 years, which means that you are extending local government elections from 2022 to 2023. Yes. Because the last time it was held was in December 2019. Right? So that would be the effect of that. So the court determined the issue was whether the period of office applied to the incumbent, people who held office, or it applied to future councilmen and to aldermen. And this is against the government. They felt the appeal was heard and the government was not successful. And that's the CCJ rule. I mean, this is the Privy Council. The Privy Council says that the extension of the life of the incumbents from 3 to 4 years and effectively extending the life of the local government elections to another year. This is what they said, and the majority judgment is a breach of constitutional rights. It contravenes entrenched rights to vote under the Constitution. They said a representative democracy is at the heart of our Constitution, and applied not to incumbents but those coming afterwards. And this is a statement. It was inimical to representative democracy that representatives are chosen by anyone but the electorate. It is not for the parliament, still less the government. Rather, it's for the electorate to choose their representatives. It would mean the government, not the electorate, had chosen the representatives. That was a harsh blow, because you have to understand with that local government matter, I believe at the lower court, the court had said, High Court said it was not subject to judicial review. The Court of Appeal heard it and said, no, it was not unconstitutional, and then the Privy Council said it was, because you were taking away the constitutional rights of the electorate, and that was not in keeping with a Republican democratic republic. So you understand, and the final one is the Bail Act. Now with the Bail Act, the Privy Council did agree with the Court of Appeal. Now the lower court, they overturned, that is the Court of Appeal overturned the lower court, but when it went to the Privy Council, they upheld the decision of the Court of Appeal. So you might say, okay, well that's good. But what is very telling about that decision, which is of course came about with this gentleman called Achille Charles. Achille Charles spent 8.5 years of his life in remand. In other words, he had not heard a committal. What had happened, his committal hearings had started under, I think, Cizé,
the magistrate?
The magistrate, the chief magistrate.
That had the whole controversy of moving up. Yes.
And the decision was made that after going through part of the hearing, they decided it had to start de novo again.
Because she took the promotion and they couldn't just give the case back to be continued with her replacement.
Well, you mean they couldn't, they didn't.
They were right.
Right, I'd rather say they didn't. And so, because he's in remand. Remand means you have not heard a committal hearing. You're waiting.
You're not guilty of anything.
Yeah, they haven't committed. No, you're not guilty. Your guilty comes, you have to commit you to stand trial.
Yes.
And then it's at the trial, then they decide guilt and innocence. So you haven't reached that stage. So you're just waiting.
He's in a pre-trial state, incarcerated.
Pre-committal stage. Not even pre-trial. You're pre-committal stage, whether you should commit him to trial or not.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's how bad it is.
Beautiful.
You understand? It's even worse than what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
Right? So he sat down there, and then they decided, no, we're going to hear de novo. So the acting magistrate said, based on the evidence that the police had presented, there was no basis on which to charge this gentleman with the offense of murder. And they had to let him, after 8.5 years, had not even been committed, right? Mm-hmm. So he's decided now, at the end of it in 2020, to test the constitutionality of the judges of the court holding him in this state of remand for all of those years, and whether in fact they could not have granted him bail during that period, in the pre-committal stage, which is before you're committed, which is remand stage, and even in the post-committal stage. And what the Attorney General argued, the government argued 2 arguments, both of which failed. They said, under the common law, the existing law was that judges had the discretion to grant bail. It's very rare to grant bail in murder cases, and even rarer in cases where you're already committed to stand trial. This is very rare in cases of murder. But it didn't mean that they didn't have that judicial discretion. It was not true to say that the existing law did not give judges that discretion, because the common law provided for it. And when they passed an ordinance in 1961, which is 1 year before we became independent, they said, the judges, the Privy Council said, that act did not take away the common law power of judges to grant bail in cases of murder. It just extended the powers. So as far as they were concerned, contrary to what the Attorney General argued, the existing law did allow judicial discretion, which was rarely exercised, to allow for bail to be granted in cases of murder, because the Bail Act, which was, of course, now they've gone back to Parliament, The Bail Act said that there are certain cases set out in Schedule 1 of the Act, the Bail Act, that you cannot get bail. And one of them is for murder. So this is why he challenged it in the Privy Council and said that that is unconstitutional, because the existing law did allow for judges to exercise judicial discretion in cases like that. Then the second part, which is really more, I can see going forward can be a matter of concern as we move forward, is the Section 13. The Section 13 of our Constitution. You know, the Attorney General's office argued, one, the existing law, which the court said, well, the existing law did give judges the discretion, and it never was taken away from them by statute. They still maintain common law jurisdiction, which they rarely exercise, but they had it, and we're not going to take it away from them. So that was the end of that argument. But the other argument that the AG division put forward was that, listen, we got a 3/5 majority, and a 3/5 majority is required where you are going to, the effect of that legislation is going to be an infringement and abrogation of your human rights under Section 4 and 5. So that is why you need a special majority, yes? So you've done our Industrial Relations Act, there are a number of pieces of legislation where the 3/5 majority and some legislation require a 3/4 majority for changing the Constitution, for example.
Right.
Right? But this required a 3/5 majority. They said we got a 3/5 majority, but the rider to Section 13 is that after you say the test to be applied is the proviso of Section 13, whether a law passed under Section 13, the 3/5 majority, which you say you got, this is a rider, is reasonably justifiable in a society that has a proper respect for the rights and freedoms of the individual.
Right.
And as much as the Attorney General argued about the state of crime and murder and all those arguments that were put forward to him, to the court was not convinced that there were sufficient arguments to take away the
right for bail
because of that proviso in the law that said it must be reasonably justifiable in a country that has a respect for the rights of the individual. And you know that England is very much a human rights. They abolished the death penalty a long time ago. So what's the upstart of that? The Court of Appeal did agree with their decision was upheld by the Privy Council. But what it means is that it is not to be given that because you get a 3/5 majority
Yes.
that you're home free.
Yeah.
You've got to satisfy that second part. And that second part is up to judicial interpretation of it. That's the thing. They interpret what that means. And by interpreting what that means, it's the Privy Council.
Well, it's not only that. Speaking with TTPS Media Ambassador Ashraf Ali on Monday, one of the things that comes up that the police has to face is the public seems to want harsher measures, right? They'll tell the cops, they'll tell the politicians, harsher measures, come down hard. But then now the legislatures and the police, to some extent, they kind of understand. Harsh measures runs the risk of, you know, there will be people who might get caught up in it, and eventually if you're innocent, you know, you'll be set free, you won't be detained or anything. But harsh measures, so more roadblocks, it's gonna inconvenience you. You know, we might have to search your car. We might want to do this. We might want to do that. Are you willing to subject yourself? Are you willing to subject yourself to the risk of, well, now if you're accused of this crime that we have removed bail from, no matter how innocent you want to claim to be, we have to go through the process, and your rights might be infringed. So on one hand, I understand the call for stricter and harsher measures against crime, but on the other hand, there is something to be said about, you know, no matter what we're going to do to try to stop crime, we can't punish the rest of the population, at least not too much, while trying to do it.
And I think what lies at the heart of our system is the remand. How many young men spend 10 years 8, 10, 9, 10 years waiting just to have that preliminary inquiry. And then at the end of the day, even if they are made to stand trial, committed to stand trial, then you wait how many other years? Can you ever bring back those years? I think part of the problem, I mean, they didn't say it, but part of the problem, the judgment may have said it because they went on and on about how they're not satisfied with the argument that the AG made about the level of crime and murder and so on. I didn't really pay that level of intent. They didn't, and I can't recall exactly what they said, but they weren't satisfied. But I think a lot of it has to do with our whole criminal justice system, that people sit in remand 10 years, how can you give back? And a lot of times it's young men, and you can't give them back. And then at the end of the day, which happened with Achille Charles, when it was finally heard, she said there's not enough evidence for this man to stand trial. So where are you giving him back the 8.5 years?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something I was wondering as you were going through. We're debating Privy Council versus CCJ. Now the CCJ might give us a different end result, right? Maybe they will agree with the minister in this specific case, maybe not.
But they agreed, the Privy Council agreed with the Court of Appeal, you know.
Right. So, but my question is to some of these situations, right? Even to some extent with murder convictions and the death penalty, because the Privy Council is not necessarily saying no outright. They're just saying you can't have him on death row for 5 years plus. Is the real issue to solve, as you said, what's going on with the courts and why this remand situation is just holding things up? Now, granted, then you could say, well, the appeals process with the death penalty might be the offshoot of that. But the remand situation seems to be one of the big bugbears.
I think in my mind, I think that is really the issue, because I think once you remand, there must be a time frame within which, by that period, the matter must be
reasonably quickly, right?
Yeah, and give a time frame, and you know, you know, you look at it from both sides. Obviously, in Trinidad, we are being overrun with murders and crime. I mean, it's in fact affecting even your home invasions. I mean, you don't feel safe in Trinidad. It's no question about it. So obviously, a lot of the public might want to say, yes, lock them up. But lock them up, yeah, but lock them up in a system that is working. For example, I make the point all the time. Why does the DPP only have 57? I don't know what has changed since the last 2 weeks, but certainly up to the other day, he had only 57 attorneys in the DPP's office. He had 59, and 2 of them went to the judiciary. 57 for a department, and he's 134 attorneys, and that is before they extended the remit of the criminal division because of the Children's Act and so on. How are they going to be in Mayaro at one point in time, and then hearing a matter in Port of Spain at the same time, and then they don't even have the HR and administrative support? And this is something the AG has been complaining about for years and years and years, and seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. I know that there was a cabinet approval by another administration for them to get 134 attorneys. It is not like the AG's office. They have their full remit, or nearly their full remit of officers. The DPP is the one responsible for crime. How can he deal with crime at all these different levels? Not only the white-collar crime, which is just as vicious and dangerous to the community when he's totally understaffed. The building that they were giving him, he kept saying it is not secure. It is not secure. And he must know why he was saying that. He may not be able to come out and say why, but I know he had his reasons why it was not secure, and he would not move into it. And it made it seem as though he was being difficult, but I don't think he was being difficult. He had his good reasons that he did not want to move into the, for whatever reason.
The Park Street building.
Whatever reason. And the fact of the matter, you know, so when you have a DPP who is hamstrung, where he's supposed to prosecute, he's the prosecutorial end of it, and he simply does not have the manpower to do that.
I would imagine any security expert with this salt will say this glass building, glass at street level, is very exposed and would not, but the thing is the building owner didn't want to make adjustments. But I have a question I want to ask you. So right now, the current situation we're in, whoever's in power, not even the PNM, I assume the UNC might not like this, right? Whoever's in power might not like this because it might look bad on the surface. People who are in remand for 2 years plus and their matter is going nowhere, like what happened with Akini Charles. He's in the pre-committal stage, right? He ain't even in the pre-trial stage. Should they have a right, if they were denied bail or if they're not allowed to have bail, should they be granted the right now to apply or reapply for bail? Because they're there for years and it's going nowhere.
They could apply. They've always had the right to apply. That is what the court say, but they rarely grant it. What you need to do is fix the DPP prosecutorial end. What you need to do is implement the DNA. What you need to do is implement the ballistics division. What you need to do is take care of those things that allow you to make a far quicker determination whether you should charge the person in the first place. You know, and I think that will go a long way. But there's so much.
If you were denied bail, can you reapply or not really?
I'm not sure. I don't see why you can't deny a thing, but I can't imagine that if you were denied in the first place, what new matter could you put forward?
And here's another, switching back now to the CCJ and the Privy Council. Of course, we've had rulings from the Privy Council. If we switch to the CCJ, is it easy for the CCJ to just say, well, no, now it's our precedence, you know, everything is going to switch to how we rule things, or will there need to be a case for them to affirmatively rule on in the future before change?
No, but I think what they did, especially in the early days, and they said so, that they were fairly new courts, so they had not built up their own body of jurisprudence. So I don't think they will ever ignore decisions of the Privy Council.
That we've had.
Yeah, and continue to have from the courts like ours that have the Privy Council as the last court.
But in the areas where they disagree.
Because we are Commonwealth jurisdiction, they can look at Canadian decisions, they can look at British.
No, but where the CCJ has disagreed, so they rule differently in Barbados, right?
Yeah.
So if we switch to the CCJ, will that ruling apply to us now and override the previous Privy Council?
Well, we'll hear our case, and having hear our case, they'll be guided by Nouveau.
Okay.
Right? So, you know, every case, so that will be their guidance. No longer will
cases moving forward.
Right. No longer Matthews and Chandler, but it will be Nouveau.
But there won't be any retroactive application?
No. Retroactivity is a very unusual thing, and you have to make specific provision to make a law retroactive. So once we have the CCJ as the final court of appeal, certainly they will take into account the decisions of the Privy Council, and certainly they may want to argue why they have taken a different position. But at the end of the day, they will then become our final appellate court.
Well, folks, we have to take a break now. With that, of course, when we come back, we'll open up the phone lines, and you could ask me or Karen or whatever you want to do with regards to what we've spoken about or anything else here on Talking Point. But stay tuned. News on the hour right after this.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I'm Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Heated online discussion sparked over Venezuelan national representing TNT at the Miss Grand International competition. 2 held, firearm and narcotics seized in the Northern Division. And internationally, a woman who died during a BBL operation in Turkey was not told of the risk about the procedure, nor for the details. Milady Materano, hailing from Venezuela, migrated to Trinidad and Tobago 5 years ago and resides in Diego Martin, emerged victorious at the conclusion of the pageant, which took place at the Banquet and Conference Center, Movie Town in Venezuela, Port of Spain. According to a report, Materano was originally born in Venezuela and has made Trinidad and Tobago her home for more than 5 years. She is renowned as a businesswoman and model, and notably made a public appearance as Barbie during the premiere of the Barbie movie in Trinidad and Tobago. Materano stood out among the 15 finalists initially chosen for the competition on July 23rd. However, her identity was only unveiled during the grand reveal ceremony held on August 6 at Luna Restaurant at the Falls in Port of Spain. Meanwhile, Stolen Productions Limited said in a press release that it supports its decision to have Ms. Materano as a representative for TNT. The release also states that it is aware of the social media uproar over the decision and has decided to stand by choosing a Venezuelan national, as TNT is a multicultural country. The pageant's website, however, outlined the criteria for persons entering the competition, which states that the person entering must be 18 years and over and must be a born national of Trinidad and Tobago. 2 men were arrested and a firearm and quantities of narcotics seized by officers of the Northern Division during an Operation Blue Line exercise conducted earlier today. Officers of the Pinto Road Police Post K9 Branch, Northern Division Task Force, areas North and South, conducted the exercise on Tuesday, 12 September 2023. During the operation, officers proceeded to the Mausica district where they conducted a search of a large drain. The search resulted in officers finding 1 white crocus bag containing 1 6-saw pistol, 1 magazine, a pistol holder, 10 grams of cocaine, and 4.5 kilograms of marijuana. The same party of officers then proceeded to the Pinto and Arima districts, where they arrested 2 male suspects, ages 21 and 20, in relation to several recent reports of robberies and break-ins in the districts. Investigations are ongoing. Internationally, a woman who died during an operation for a buttocks enlargement in Turkey was not given enough information to make a safe decision about the procedure, a coroner has concluded. 31-year-old Melissa Kerr from Gallstad, Norfolk, died at a private hospital in Istanbul in 2019. Coroner Jacqueline Lake said she would be writing a report for the health secretary to try and prevent further deaths from this risky procedure. Kerr had gone abroad to have what is commonly referred to as a Brazilian butt lift, or a BBL, the Norwich inquest heard. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Sierra Ali. Thanks for watching.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain. And it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes any time KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, now is the time we open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. I had my say, Karen had her say, although, to be fair, Karen has more to say. So let's try to get through some of these calls. We have Santa Cruz on the line. Good morning, Santa Cruz.
Good morning. Good morning. I don't know if you're hearing me.
Yes, we're hearing you.
I'm having dead air. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Hi, Sean. Good morning. Good
Morning.
morning, Miss Karen. I just wanted to call in and give my 2 cents on this Miss Grand International pageant and the young woman from Venezuela. First of all, I have no idea why people are getting their clothes up in a bunch. If the criteria for the pageant says that the entrant, the contestant, has to be born in Trinidad and Tobago, then I understand that, oh, well, she wasn't born in Trinidad and Tobago, so she shouldn't be participating. But and I haven't seen the criteria for entrance into the pageant, so I don't know. I've never even heard of this Miss Grand International pageant. I only realized that after doing some research, it's about the 11th edition of this pageant, so it's a new pageant. That said, again, unless the criteria say that entrants must be born in the country that they're representing, then if the judges feel that the woman qualifies for winning the pageant, then so be it. All we have to hope is that we go back and do the research on this pageant and see what kinds of questions are asked and make sure that your representative knows the country that she's representing. Yes, she's lived in Trinidad and Tobago for 5 or 6 years. Hopefully, she knows and understands the culture of Trinidad and Tobago and can represent Trinidad and Tobago when she's on the world stage. That said, leave the woman alone unless she doesn't meet the criteria.
Well,
and that's all I have to say.
Caller, I
love you guys.
Thank you, caller. Caller, I actually had no issue with regards to the local leg. My problem is she's supposed to represent the country. Now, I can't necessarily find anything to say with regards to nationality on your representative of an individual country. So I can't affirmatively say it's against rules or not, but on a personal level, I do just find it odd that we're going to pick someone who is not a national, who hasn't even lived here for 10 years. She doesn't have 5 to 6 years, but that's the representative of Trinidad and Tobago. This is not representing in a sports competition. This is to represent being a woman in Trinidad and Tobago. It is kind of odd. So that's why I said I can't fault people for being upset about it. I'm not necessarily upset, but on a technical level, I don't think this is how it should be. We do have a caller from Diego Martin. Petty Valley, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Petty Valley.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning, Ms. Nunez.
Morning.
Sean, you brought up with the murder, suicide with the 2 police officers. I think you brought up something like their work with stress and COVID and thing. I have personal detailed information, which I wouldn't really put this on here. It had nothing to do with the stress on the job or nothing like that. It is a love triangle. And I'll leave it as that till you all get more information, you'll find out where I was correct. So I'll leave it at that from personal information. It had nothing to do with burnt out with job and stuff.
When I said stress, I didn't mean job. I actually meant the stress of their life and their interactions together. Which I didn't necessarily know that there was a love triangle situation possibly going on.
Allegedly. Details. When it come out, you all will realize what I'm saying.
Okay.
But a love triangle, I'll leave it as that.
Okay.
Now, to Ms. Nunez, what is your position on the CCJ and the CCJ and the final court appeal to the England? What is really your position? Well, listen carefully. I would like to hear your position. What is your position on support?
You're saying it in a very definitive way, and I will answer you in that I have gone back and forth on that. And one of the things that made me go pro the CCJ is because I said, well, what other country has a similar sort of ethnic, religious, and those kind of considerations that maybe someone will say we won't get justice because of those kinds of unconscious biases that the CCJ judges may have. But we've seen Ghana has done a very good job on that with the recent elections and overturned a decision that was clearly unfair. And so I think, and without any any kind of uprising, people accepted it. So I think if I had to answer your question, my concern was that the other jurisdictions that are members of the Caribbean Court of Justice have homogeneous populations, meaning that they're basically Afro-Caribbean islands and Christian in their faith. So they do not have the complexities of Trinidad, and I wondered if it would impact on the decisions of the judges. So I still sit on the fence somewhat. One of the reasons, as I said, is the decision with the Ghana, which I think has similar considerations. And the last reason is, to be very frank with you, my matter went all the way to the Privy Council. And when I went to the Privy Council, I will say that I was in a way relieved that the Privy Council ruled on it, because the appellants could not say, as they had tried to say at the appellate court, that issues of apparent bias and all that sort of argument. And they had to withdraw it. But the point is, they could not bring that. When they got a decision of the Privy Council, they could say nothing. They had to shut up. Now, if it was the CCJ, I don't know if they would have.
Right, because conflict of interest.
Yeah, because you see a lot of the CCJ judges I would know. Marjorie Rajnath Lee, I know her personally. The Saunders, the head president, he did the foreword to one of my books that I wrote on family law. So Anderson was a lecturer at Cave Hill. So, then they might say, oh, she knows people there, and that's why that affected. But Privy Council, who do I know?
Now, note, Karen, your case might be unique, but this might be an argument to say maybe a provision could be hard for situations like that, even if we move to the CCJ.
But there was no
bias.
It
could go to the... Okay, well, right, that it could go to the Privy Council. We have a call on Shagona. Sorry, I'm keeping you...
I hope I answered your question best I can.
Morning, caller. You're on here.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Hi, good morning. To Mrs. Teixeira of immense individual intellectualism, and to you, small of greatest emotional intelligence. Right, questions. If the Venezuelan girl cannot be represented of Trinidad, how can the Minister of Finance act as Minister of Finance and act as Prime Minister? Because he's not a Trinidadian, he's of some other nationality. Right? And the according to the law, you must be a Trinidadian to be a Prime Minister. Now, the other thing is, if the Minister of Energy made one big hoo-and-ha about going to Japan to correct the issue with the gas agreement that was made for Caribbean gas chemicals of Neil and Massey in the Vecini plant, and now Naikwan is taking him to court for the gas agreement on the same terms that he's not able to fulfill, and you're hearing absolutely nothing about it. How come the Minister of Energy is not saying a word about these two things, which is in principle the same philosophy?
That has been reported on. I believe he commented on it or somebody else commented on it, and basically the reason why, or it might have come out due to the court matter, because I think Naikwan was denied once. They're appealing, right? The reason is Naikwan has a bill. They can't pay. They can't pay for the gas. So the contract agreement is you get gas, we get money for the gas. If at some point you're $19 million in the hole, and it might be 19 million US, or 16 million US, we're going to have to stop because you owe us money for gas we already gave you.
We can't come to a decision because it's going to appeal.
Well, it's gone to the court, right.
And once it goes to the appeal court, it is going now sub judice, so that it would not be right for the Minister of Energy any of the parties to speak on it. And I mean, based on what you're reading, that is a substantial breach of a contract. If you know, but we are not going to discuss that because we have to hear for what the judges and from my experience, things are far more complicated than they may appear. And the second thing with the dual citizenship, I thought that gentleman had to give up his citizenship to Ghana.
Is that
in
the
order
Minister
to
of
become
Finance
minister.
that he's speaking about?
Yeah, I know, but I
Right.
think all ministers,
Yeah.
there are requirements to be able to be a minister of government.
Not just a minister, isn't it, to be in Parliament?
Yes, I mean, so
Right.
I don't know that Mr. Imbert may have British connection, because I know his mother is British,
Yes.
but I don't think that he has...
Yeah, you can't give it up, right?
You have to. Remember with, what's his name, who's Minister of Public Utilities? He had to run and take Ghana, he had dual citizenship.
Right.
And also to this thing, Calypsonian,
Gypsy?
Gypsy had to do the same
Right.
thing because he had dual citizenship. So I don't know about that. I don't know where that information is coming from.
So yes, so caller, so that has been happened. And again, I understand what you're saying. It's just think about it on the basics. She's representing us in an international pageant, but she was born and raised and has no actual ancestral ties to Trinidad. She was born and raised in another country. Is that really representing us? I mean, to some extent, is it that big of a deal? It's not as though it's going to change the price of bread, but still, some national pride here. Can we have national pride in someone who is not a national? We have a caller. Sorry, I can't remember, I didn't hear where from, but we have another caller on the line. Good morning. Shagonas.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Morning, morning.
I find this problem that the DPA had with the accommodations change. Because when I was in the public service and you were getting accommodation, the person, the client, was actively involved. And in those days you had the O&M division used to do it. And they will see that all the problems are addressed. So I cannot it's possible to me how you could reach the stage where you already acquire the office and then the client finding enormous faults with it. Any explanation for Karen, you know?
I'm a little puzzled about, do you mean literal accommodation, like somewhere this person lives, or accommodation in terms of making, you know, I'm not too sure, I'm a little puzzled. Do you know what he speaks?
No, I'm sorry. I'm kind of...
Yeah,
I don't know if you could clarify with us, Professor.
Yeah, because I'm not quite sure. Maybe he doesn't want to be more specific.
When they get an accommodation, somebody must agree with the client because they have to do partitions and all kind of things like that.
What is the situation you're speaking of, Professor?
They want the DPA when they get the office for him.
Oh, the building. Okay, right.
I couldn't
the
figure out how it's at the end of the day.
Yes. Okay, now we have some more clarity. I have to be, I want to be careful, because I have to be careful. The DPP has expressed he has security concerns. And I think that the security concerns go beyond just
no, I know all that, but
location.
I want to know how that happened. Because
How that happened? How that happened? But this is what I would recommend. I mean, in the choice of a building, the DPP should clearly have a say in that, because
he always had when I was in the public service.
Well, it appears that that is not the case. Well, if that were the case, he would not for 4 years refuse to go to that building. And he has said he has security concerns. You could understand what he means. You could read between the lines.
I understand what he means, but my whole point is why this wasn't addressed before.
Well, why it wasn't addressed before? Why
well, that's political.
How do you know that he did, and you understand the DPP is not free to make public statements. You notice that the only time he says anything is between a joint select committee. He has very great limitations on speaking out in public. How do you know that for the last 8-9 years he has been begging them for staff in the public? No, but it's all the same point. It's all the same point.
The one with
all the same
accommodation,
point.
I was involved.
Anyway, the point is, you know, neither, well, maybe you have more information than I do, but I'm pretty confident that the reasons why he will not move to that building are the security issues that remain there, and for some reason, the government continued to pay the rent for 4 years for an unoccupied building, and you can decide why they decided to do that. You can decide, but I'm sure you remember. I am sure you remember that the DPP came out and said that in his conference room there was a line, a red infrared light going directly into his conference room, and they were listening to his conversations. And when it came to sweeping it, they wanted to send their own people, and he refused. He got his own people to go in there. And when they went in, they found the cause of that his conversations were listened to. You've got to read between the lines.
That is cooking.
You've got to read between the lines.
Dealing with the suitability of the accommodation, because I know there was a procedure to deal with it.
Okay, I think I've said enough on that, and
you.
If you wish, you can read between the lines. If you don't wish to, well, you don't read between the lines.
I would just say, look, it's obvious it's politics, and politics has a way of circumventing or preempting or bypassing proper public service procedure. Right? That's basically how it is. Sometimes politicians do what they want. Sometimes it might even be legal, like completely legal. However, at the end of the day, for whatever reason, the government said, this is the building, and we paid for it, and we don't want to pay for another building, right?
And I'm sure he was objecting all the time. This is the DPP, you know.
And a corner of the building at ground level is made of glass. So if... And
there are other reasons.
Well, there are other reasons too, but that alone, if you look at any official building that deals with law enforcement issues, it ain't gonna, you ain't gonna have like a corporate glass facade that anybody could drive a truck through.
It's not only that, there are other reasons which he cannot say on the sea, and we know that.
We have another caller. San Fernando, last caller for the morning. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
Let me first say on your news report with Sarah Ali, she did say on that report that one of the rules of the competition was that the person has to be a Trinidad and Tobago national. Right, what your news report said at 9 o'clock. Moving on, the issue we have in Trinidad and Tobago with crime stems is a judicial issue in the main, because swift justice is required as part of this crime fighting effort, and we are not having swift justice. From, as Karen said, the DPP, in my opinion, it is deliberately so that the DPP is understaffed. I think that's a deliberate issue. The issue of the Privy Council again, as opposed to the CCJ, in my opinion, I am hesitant to go the way of the CCJ. Although, as Karen said, I move back and forth. One of the things that affects the system is all these international conventions that we sign on to, that eventually affects our judicial system, as opposed when it comes to court cases, when it comes to appeals and that type of thing, is another hindrance. We really need constitutional reform to deal with this, you know. We need constitutional reform firstly, and then we need to move to understand that you can't have, as you say, a man in remand for 8 years. I know a person, a guy who does some grass cutting for me. He had gone to jail. He had gotten charged for marijuana and went to jail and got 8 years. and he said he was going to appeal this case. And when he reached in there, he met people who were there for 10 years and didn't have their case called. He said there were other people who were waiting on him, who had appeals 7 and 8 years. He said he changed his mind. He came out of jail and then changed his life. Now, one last thing, Karen. You need to understand from our point of view, the callers. You sit in a privileged position, you know. You have been able to see behind the curtain, you know, Karen.
That's true. That is true.
We can't see behind the curtain, you know. So I understand when you make comments where you're coming from, you know. But a lot of the callers don't understand that you have seen behind the curtain.
That is true.
And I can appreciate that. So have a good day.
Yes, and since I've seen behind the curtain, I have to be careful. I have to be careful what I say, because behind the curtain isn't so nice. So you just have to be so mindful of that. But you are right. I just want to make one comment before we go. Yeah. And that is with regard to what the president said with the MPs being overburdened. I agree that if she meant, the president meant ministers who are also MPs, I absolutely agree. It is not, you can't function effectively doing both. A ministerial portfolio, if you take it seriously, is just so demanding. And then to be effective as an MP in your constituency, regardless of the staffing you have and the councillors who may not support your government, your party, because of the way the boundary lines may be drawn. So if she meant that, I agree with her. If she meant those who are MPs and MPs alone, no. I suspect she couldn't say that because that's talking about issues of constitutional change, and I think that's beyond her remit. So if I understood her to me, I will agree with her with MPs who are, and that is not anything new. That has been said over and over again by a number of constitutional committees that have made that recommendation. So it is a recommendation that is out there, and I'm glad in a way that she brought it to the fore, so maybe we can have a discussion about exactly what did she intend by that, and hopefully move that argument forward.
You know, I'm in the middle. I agree with you, but I also could see where an MP that is really committed to the role might be a full-time role. Right? So, but you know, we don't have time for that debate. I just wanted to wind up this TNT Miss Grand International. It's a new beauty pageant. It was started in Thailand. That's why we don't really know about it. This is the first time we have had a franchise holder to select a representative. Representatives of countries or territories could be picked by either a national contest, an internal casting, or being handpicked. So the international contest does not have any requirements to place upon us. Right, that's one thing. The organizers, ironically, are named Stolen Productions Limited, SPL Pageants. They believe that their winner is a shining example of what it means to be a tree. And I understand why they could say that, because at the end of the day, we accept, we absorb and accept many cultures and many cultural influences. Right, but if all it, I mean, we accept all cultural influences. Anybody could come here and become a Trini. But to say in 6 years you are going to be the shining example of what it means to be. Exactly. That's a hard pill to swallow.
But we're too late to go into it.
That is a hard pill to swallow.
You notice I did not comment on it because I tried to stay away, but I cannot accept that at all.
Because she could be an example of what it means to be a Trini, an example of what it means to be integrating into Trinidad and Tobago.
That should be another
but to be the shining example,
she should enter into. Right. A Miss Integrator into the Trinidad and Tobago.
To be a shining example, right? When the influences that grew her, that formed her, that formulated her, right? We integrate cultures and then make it a part of us. But she's not Trini.
You have to leave that alone. You have to leave that alone. We don't have time. And I didn't want to comment because I think I might have been a little harsh, so better I didn't say anything.
A Venezuelan born maybe that grew up here, that was influenced by here, that lived here for decades, that has roots here. What are her roots? What about her, except coming here for the last 6 years makes it to me. If I lived in America for 6 years, I'm not an American.
And let me just tell you something. The Venezuelans who have come here, unregulated, a lot of them, done a lot of damage to this country. And they're always in the papers, so let's just say they're not our favorite people at this moment. Let's say they're not my favorite
I am not
people.
ready to bring that into this. I am limiting it. I am limiting it to this situation.
Okay.
It's not the end of the world. You know, I'm not gonna cry over spilt milk. Yeah. This is the first representative of Miss TNT Grand International, and she is technically Venezuelan. That's all I'm gonna say. I understand, Miss Santa Cruz, I understand, but like Karen said, we can't do that if it was America. We can't send right? We can send the best candidate, prettiest, smartest, most well-spoken, most dynamic personality. Trinidadian. Let her live in America for 6 years. She ain't gonna be Miss USA. That's just not happening. So, or Miss UK, or Miss Canada, or Miss Venezuela.
Or any European country.
But this pageant, and the international pageant is in infancy, so it's, you know.
Stay in its infancy.
Stay there. Anyway, look, way over time. Folks, at the end of the day, however it turns out, right, however it turns out, if she goes to represent us, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, right? It's not so.
The end of that competition, though.
Anyway, have a good day, as my coach always says, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Goodbye.
WESN.
I'm Keaton Shaw, and we are WESN, the content capital.
Young at heart, purpose-driven, patriot even. When you like to party, but are still passionate about discussing important issues, the only place where your needs will be met is WESN Content Capital.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it.
It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Did you tell your hubby about it, first of all?
I did.
When you were telling him, did you think that he was going to think differently of you or less of you?
I thought exactly that.
In case you've missed it, it's an encore of Nicole Larson Live. Relive some of the riveting experiences of everyday people who candidly shared with me their stories, life challenges, stories of hope, and eventual victories.
Because he is not like man, because he is the God. It is a promise that we can hold on to.
The report came back that she had two properly...
Eric, behave yourself, no man.
Two properly working kidneys.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Searches, but also to power villages or a few houses. These generators are very important, just like the tents, sleeping bags, beds and mattresses.
Those are donations that could be sent in the coming days. However, Morocco has not yet requested emergency assistance from Belgium.
We were very surprised that the international aid was limited to the 4 countries which received accreditation. But I don't doubt for a single moment that given the scale of the needs, we will expand this as quickly as possible.
While waiting for the green light from Rabat, citizen mobilization continues throughout Belgium, where many cities have set up collections of basic necessities.
Now, Kim Jong-un has wrapped up the first leg of his visit to Russia. The North Korean leader will be visiting 2 other cities in the country, this as he pledges his full support to Moscow. Kim Jong-un praised Russia's fight against imperialism, referring to the ongoing war in Ukraine. Washington, meanwhile, has been concerned the meeting will strengthen defense ties between Russia and North Korea even further. At least 30 people, including children, have died after a fire broke out at an apartment block in Vietnam's capital. The 9-story building in Hanoi was home to nearly 150 residents. Vietnam's Prime Minister, meanwhile, visited the site of the fire earlier today and called for the completion of anti-fire regulations in short-story buildings. 1 year ago, Mahsa Amini was arrested by Iran's morality police for improperly wearing her veil. 3 days later, she would die in police custody. Her death sparked nationwide protests, which roiled authorities in the Islamic Republic. While the clampdown that followed was fierce, Mahsa Amini's death was not in vain, with some changes taking place in the country. With us now is Ershad Alijani from the France 24 Observers team. Ershad has been closely following the protests and has spoken to women inside the country even after the protests dissipated. Ershad, great to see you. 1 year has passed. What has changed within Iran, and should we be talking about the country as before Mahsa Amini and after Mahsa Amini?
Definitely, if you talk to any Iranian of
any background, they all say that Iran is not the same as it was in September 2022. Families, even conservative ones, are giving their daughters more freedom to choose their own lifestyle. Society not only tolerates but even encourages women without hijab, and in some neighborhoods it has become the norm for women to not wear hijab. For example, cafe owners do not require their female customers to wear the hijab, although they risk being closed down by the authorities if they do not. I've been speaking to Iranian women from different backgrounds. And for example, Sita, she's a university student, told me the following. Before the protest, when a woman went out with her hair uncovered, people stared, even other women. Now the most common reaction is smile or some encouraging words. Another Iranian woman that I talked to recently, Varia, an Iranian influencer in Shiraz in central Iran, she told me, verbal harassment of women on the street, which used to be frequent, has decreased. I have not had a bad experience in a year, even though I go out with my hair uncovered every day.
And what has changed between Iranians, women especially, and the regime?
There are no millions of Iranian women who defy the compulsory hijab almost every public spaces, and the security forces are overwhelmed by the number. They can only arrest a small percentage of these rebellious women. They cannot enforce the laws. But to return to your question about whether anything has changed at the level of the regime, I have to say no, at least not in a positive sense. The Sharia law that prescribes the hijab is still in force. And what is worse is that the parliament is considering a new law that will tighten the restrictions even further and make the penalties for not wearing the hijab even harsher. According to this draft, the fines for not wearing hijab jumps from €1 to €3,000 and the maximum prison sentence to 10 years.
But even though they want to toughen the laws, women are still flouting the rules. So are we at an impasse now?
Yes, we are seeing a kind of impasse. Once again, it's more complicated than that. So the answer is not a simple yes or no. The Iranians are fighting a very complicated situation. They have to deal with a very well-equipped regime that is willing to do whatever it risks, whatever it takes to survive. But if you look at the big picture, Iranians, and I have to say women, have been pushing back the regime non-stop from the day one, actually. Look at a picture. The Iranian women athletes who competed the Beijing Asian Olympic Games in 1919, as you see, they were forced to wear black chadors. And now, if we look at another video from today, for example, some days ago, this video is from the streets in Iran just days ago. Girls walking in crop tops in the street, and Iranian women do not seem to be pessimistic about the future either. Sita, the university student, told me about this. We have won some battles so far, but the war is not over yet.
And Ershad, are these women ready to die for their freedoms?
They don't want to die. They don't go outside as a suicide mission. But yes, many of them are willing to risk their lives. One of the slogans were woman, life, freedom. They want a normal life, but they are aware of the risk, and many of them are willing to risk their lives.
Ershad Alijani, thank you very much for that. Ershad joining us from the Observer's team. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching.
Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, the controversial issue of how some Muslim women and girls dress captures the headlines here in France. Once again, the spotlight is on clothing in schools. Also, the missing women of Peru. Thousands disappear each year, primarily due to human trafficking, prostitution and gender violence, with their mothers now taking to the streets demanding justice. And a kick for equality, the nuns of Kathmandu who teach women and girls kung fu as an act of empowerment. But we begin here in France, where a government moved to ban the abaya, a traditional dress worn by some Muslim women and girls in public schools, has reignited debate. This over the nation's approach to secularism, or laïcité as it's known in French. And just like previous controversies over the veil or the bikini, the issue centres largely around women's clothing. It's also divided progressive politicians, as Alison Sargent reports.
Kicking off the French school year with another national debate about secularism. In one of his first major acts as education minister, Gabriel Attal announced that the long, ample dress known as the abaya and its masculine equivalent, the camis, would be banned in public schools, joining veils, kippas, and large crosses as religious symbols considered conspicuous and banished under a 2004 law.
Over the past few months, infringements on secularism have considerably grown, with the wearing of religious garments like the abaya and camis that have reappeared and have sometimes taken hold in certain schools. This choice is a choice of our values and a refusal of communitarianism.
But French Muslim groups say the abaya is simply a traditional garment, not a religious symbol, a sentiment echoed by some of the young girls wearing it.
When you wear it, you sort of think of yourself as a princess, like Middle Eastern women. So frankly, it's not even a religious garment.
It's a dress that all girls wear, both veiled and non-veiled. So it's a bit of a problem. But well, we have to adapt.
The ban has been welcomed by politicians on the right, but has divided those on the left. While many from the socialist and communist parties salute the move as in line with France's secular values, politicians from the far-left France Unbowed party say the ban is the latest move to stigmatize Muslims, particularly young women, under the guise of secularism. And former Green Party leader Cécile Duflot posted a photo of a designer dress, pointing out the difficulty of distinguishing it from an abaya, an ambiguity many say opens the door to discrimination.
You cannot implement such a ban without implementing racial profiling as well. Because will a non-Muslim wearing a maxi dress bought at in the same retailer as a Muslim one will be prevent him from wearing it? Is it an abaya depending on the origin of the person or the supposed religion?
Thorny questions that educators are still largely on their own to resolve. Meanwhile, the one thing many do agree on is that debate over the abaya has distracted from more important issues like lack of teachers, social segregation, and the impact of high cost of living on students and families.
Now to Peru, where 60% of those who disappear each year are women. More than 11,000 women were reported missing in the country in 2022, the majority of them teenagers. Most disappearances are linked to either human trafficking, prostitution or domestic violence, their mothers having taken to the streets demanding justice, as our team on the ground report.
Señora Norma no está sola. Estamos con usted. No, no, no. No está perdida. Está desaparecida y no hizo nada la policía.
Where is Shirley Villanueva Rivera? Several times a year, these activists and her mother Norma gather in front of Lima's Supreme Court of Justice. They're calling for more action to find Shirley, a 24-year-old student who disappeared in 2017 after an evening with friends.
We demand that the Lima courts reopen Shirley's case and that justice be done. We will fight to the bitter end.
In Peru, 60% of the disappeared are women and half of them are minors. Some disappearances are voluntary, but most are linked to human trafficking networks, prostitution and domestic violence. An uncertainty that Rosario Aiba knows only too well. Her daughter disappeared on the 13th of August 2016. Solseret was a mother of two and a student. The case became symbolic of the issue in the country.
Her partner called me around 8:45 to tell me that Sol had left. I said, "What do you mean she's gone? Where is she gone?" He said he didn't know, and that she'd taken her clothes and her bag.
It was the start of an interminable wait for Rosario and her husband. A week passed before the police agreed to raise the alarm. Then it took 1.5 years to geolocate her daughter's mobile phone. No action was taken. They had to wait 2 more years before the investigation was relaunched. And then, a revelation. Solseret's SIM card had been used by her sister-in-law. She eventually confessed to the murder and told them where to find the remains of the body. Solseret's brother-in-law and sister-in-law were eventually convicted of murder, and her husband found to be an accomplice.
The police need the will to investigate and to have patience like we had with them. When they told me she left on her own or she's found another boyfriend, I said, whatever, just look for her.
In 2019, legislation was passed in Peru imposing a protocol for the disappearance of vulnerable people, including requiring searches to be launched within a few hours and expanded police facilities. But NGOs like Amnesty International complain that the rules are not being sufficiently followed.
We need to improve the search for missing women. And to improve that, we need a special unit with people who are entirely dedicated to this work. In other countries, they have succeeded. Guatemala, for example, has a special search system. It's something we could learn from here in Peru.
Another problem is that the National Register for Disappearances is too imprecise and not up to date. In Peru, less than half of the missing are ever found. These mothers are therefore continuing to demonstrate alongside feminist groups in the hope that one day there will be fewer disappearances and that their calls for justice will be heard.
And finally, it's an image that resembles a feminist take on a Bruce Lee movie. Close to Kathmandu, a group of Buddhist nuns, mostly from poor backgrounds in India and Tibet, pray, dance and learn martial arts, just like men, as this fraudster report shows.
3, 4, 5.
At dawn in this Buddhist monastery, the nuns gather in formation, swords drawn, with a stern look on their faces. This morning, like every morning, they are practicing Kung Fu for 2 hours. A surprising routine for these women, who preach non-violence and are often destined for a life of meditation and prayer.
In the whole Himalayan region, the nuns are not allowed to do the physical exercises and all, but we are the first to break these vows and come out from this. It's not like Kung Fu is for only the fighting, but it's really helped to do our fitness, exercise and all.
Their day begins at 3 a.m. They gather to chant prayers, a daily ritual for all practicing Buddhists. At most convents, men usually come to lead the services, but here, it's the nuns that take on this role.
I came here when I was 9 years old. Before that, I had never seen a nun lead prayer. I'm very happy and proud to have this opportunity.
These nuns are from a particular lineage in Buddhism that started giving women more power in the 1990s. As a result, today these nuns can practice religious dances, learn sacred texts, and do construction work. a job that would have been out of their reach if they had stayed with their families.
Construction is something that is often reserved for men, but now I can do it. I'm so happy to be able to do this as a woman, especially as a nun.
A feminist mindset is instilled in these nuns from an early age. The youngest ones practice Kung Fu every day under the watchful eye of 23-year-old Jigme Yangchen Gamo. She's lived at this monastery since she was 10.
Past years, there is like every parents tell that girls can't do this, girl can't speak very loudly and such of things. So in our nunnery, in the young girls, we teach that we can do anything, you know. So we can compare what they can't. We can be more strong with doing Kung Fu. So I think it's like gender equality also.
It's a cause the 300 nuns continue to fight for. They want to honor the surname they share, Jigme, which means the one without fear.
And that's all for this edition. We'd love to hear your suggestions for the 51%, so do get in touch via Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. And you can catch our previous episodes on our website. So until our next show, bye for now.
I'm Gulliver Cragg, France 24's correspondent in Kiev. I'm forever crisscrossing Ukraine, Poland and other countries in the region to keep you up to date with all the news from Central and Eastern Europe. Join me on Live from Paris and in all France 24's news and magazine programmes.
Gulliver Cragg, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.